Today is August 5th, 2022. My name is Gabrielle Wells. I'm in Williamsburg, Virginia at the College of William and Mary. Joining me today for an oral history interview is
Jason Lee Bennett.
And what's your military branch and rank?
United States Navy, retired as a Chief Petty Officer, pay rank E7.
This interview is part of the Crossing the Military-Civilian Divide, Oral Histories with Marginalized Veterans of Virginia project. Before we get started, do I have your permission to record this interview?
You do.
So to get started, we're going to start with some basic biographical information to build a basis. So let's begin with when and where you were born.
I was born in Boise, Idaho, in 1975.
Okay, and did you grow up in Boise, Idaho?
Yes, up until I joined the military, I spent my entire life there, yes.
What were some of the things you liked to do for fun growing up as a child?
Definitely loved playing outdoors. It was great for that, the mountains. Would go hunting, fishing, ride my bicycle, snow skiing. We were about an hour from a ski resort, so it was really, really nice. Played baseball for a few years, and pretty much sums that up. A lot of outdoor activities is what I really enjoyed.
Did you have any siblings?
2 older sisters, yes.
How was your relationship with them?
Very good. Love them to death.
Where did you go to high school and when?
I went to Bora High, and I was there from, trying to remember. I graduated in 92. Sorry, because it's been so long ago, I haven't really thought about it. Right around 92 is when I graduated.
What were your favorite subjects in school?
Math and sciences, definitely.
Did you play any sports in school?
I did not play sports in school. Kind of more concentrated on the school aspect of everything.
So playing baseball and all that was when you were younger?
Was younger. I actually played right before I joined the military. So in 94, 93 time frame, I found an out-of-school league for older kids. They called it a Senior Babe Ruth League. So I actually played baseball for them. Kind of one last hurrah before I joined the military.
Did you attend college after high school?
I did not. Everything was done through the military. The technical school and stuff, I joined as a nuclear operator for them, an electronics technician. So I actually learned electronics and eventually qualified as a reactor operator in my junior enlisted time frame.
So after high school, did you immediately decide you wanted to go in the military?
I'd always had an inkling. I did what they called the delayed entry program. So I was a little time off from when I graduated to the actual time that I left for the Navy. It was about a year. But I'd always had in mind of being in the military.
And did you specifically want Navy or did you want another branch?
I looked around, had some ideas. I'd talked to the Army. I'd actually talked to the Air Force. My dad said the Marines were off limits. My dad was in the Army. He was in the Army actually in Vietnam. But talking to an uncle on my mom's side, I had a couple uncles. One was an airborne ranger in Vietnam. Another one, her baby brother was actually did special forces, tried out for Delta Group and whatnot. They both kind of said, jumping out of planes and stuff is fun. And you do a lot of things, but it's tough on the body. But we've always heard great things about the Navy nuke program. They're where it's at. If you want a future outside that's really just the sky's the limit, do that. So I was like, okay, I'll give it a whirl. And that's what I signed up as. Talked to the Navy and talked about becoming a nuke.
So you had a lot of family that was in the military?
Yes.
Were any of your parents in the military?
My dad was in the Army. He was in Vietnam. His dad was actually in the Navy. So was his dad was already passed at this point in time. But his mom, when she found out I was joining the Navy, she was just tickled to death about another family member joining the Navy.
So how was your life growing up with your father in the military? Did you move around a lot?
We didn't. He was actually out before he met my mom, and they had me. So he was in the reserves. I vaguely remember as a kid, because I was really young at this point in time, I do remember going out to the local reserve facility, it was called Gowan Field out there, and visiting him a couple of times. He was a helicopter mechanic out there. He was air traffic control as his full-time MOS when he was in Vietnam, but he did a lot of work and stuff elsewhere. So I do remember going out there. So he was in a reserve status at that point in time, and talking to him growing up and whatnot. Due to some, I guess, friction with one of his bosses at work, he kind of just dropped the reserve thing. He stopped doing it after a while. So
did your family have any big role in your decision to join the Navy? Like, were they supportive?
Oh, they were always supportive. My parents have always been supportive of what I've done. So aside from the fact of my dad saying the Marines was off limits when I started looking at the military, they would have supported me in whatever branch I joined, Army, Navy, or Air Force. Because I had actually looked at joining the Air Force at one point in time, even possibly as a combat controller, which is one of their special operations group. But again, after talking to a couple of my uncles, it's like, if you really want to set up, do Navy nuke. So I started looking at that and started pursuing that, and that's what I ended up going with.
So did they have, were they kind of pushing you towards the military, or were they just willing to help you along your path?
Just help me along my path. There was no push of you have to join the military or you have to go to college, you have to do this. I'd always known early on that I was going to have to do something, be it military, be it college, or be it a technical school of some kind, to have a future, to set myself up to be successful and to continue on in life. So I just chose the military.
So about when did you join the Navy?
That was, I officially left in March of '94. And then went to Orlando, Florida for boot camp. And then actually my A school, which is the technical school and power school, was all down there at that point in time. So I stayed in Orlando for about 3 years. So between A school, power school, and boot camp.
How was the adjustment from living in Boise, Idaho, to being in Florida?
Definitely getting used to the humidity was the big thing. The heat, not so much, but in the summertime, the humidity, that was the biggest adjustment for me. The military life, my parents will always say I was a good kid. I guess it wasn't that big of an adjustment for me. I mean, I was used to getting up early, doing what I needed to do and stuff like that. So it was just the schooling, because it was it's a fast-paced schooling. Anybody that's familiar with the nuclear power program, it's a fast-paced curriculum. So I struggled a little bit. It really separates folks that know and can learn and understand from the ones that can't. And then, so it wasn't that bad.
So what was your time like in boot camp?
I know some folks are probably going to cringe over this, but to me, I thought it was kind of a joke. I understood the point of it. I always, again, being open-minded and having very supportive parents, I understood what boot camp was designed to do. So to me, I didn't really struggle. I knew we were going to get cycled, as they like to call it, worked out, push-ups, sit-ups, whatever it may be, physical training. I'd actually started my getting physically ready well over a year before I even joined. So the physical aspect wasn't really that big of a deal to me, especially in the Navy. Mm-hmm. Always the different branches rubbing elbows, like, oh yeah, the Navy's the weaklings and whatnot. And then you got the chair force or the Marines and stuff like that, and the Army. So I was expecting it, but it was still difficult. I mean, learning and that structure and stuff like that, the very specific way of folding your clothes, making the bed and stuff like that, to provide a baseline of following basic instructions. So,
what was the hardest part about boot camp?
Just being away from home. The first time I'd really been away from home, I'd been at home my entire time up until that point. So homesick, missing my mom and dad and my sisters a lot. That was probably the toughest time. But knowing I was getting ready for the next step in my life.
Were you able to stay in contact at all during boot camp?
Yes. Usually on Sundays. It was after probably about the first 3 or 4 weeks of being down there, they finally opened up phone privileges and stuff. So we would have to march over to the phone center. They'd have to have a calling card, and I'd call. So sometimes it was pretty tough trying to get a hold of my mom because she was still working at that point in time. My dad was really tough to get a hold of at work because he was always on the move. But the first time I made the phone call, I still remember it to this day. It's the greatest thing ever. And then, they were supportive. I was there to do a job, so, it progressively got better because I got a little bit more contact. And then once I was done with boot camp, it was, I was just going to school and stuff, so I didn't have to have special permission or anything like that to make phone calls.
So do you think the phone calls really helped you the most during boot camp, or was there anything else?
Letters, too. We were able to write and whatnot, so when I couldn't make a phone caller, that we could still write letters, and getting letters in the mail and getting some packages and stuff on occasions was nice.
Do you remember the dates you were in boot camp?
Let's see. So I got down there in March of '94, March 21st to be exact. About 8 weeks later, so April, May, it was right around the May-June time frame that we graduated, and then we marched over to Naval Nuclear Power Training Command.
So was your advanced training immediately after boot camp finished?
Yes. We started class probably about 2.5 weeks later, because I was actually fortunate enough that when I graduated boot camp and went over to the training command, we were the last group they were waiting on. So there has been a couple groups that had already been there for almost about a month, because they have to wait for a large enough group to class up to different ratings. So there's the nuclear power program's divided into, for the enlisted ranks, it's electronics technicians, electricians mates, and mechanical machinist mates is what they call them, mechanics. So they got to get a large enough group of everybody in to start a full class, because they'll start all three at the same time. So we were the last group of ETs they were waiting on, plus a couple of mechanics, and then we started class like 2 weeks later, so we didn't have to wait around that long.
So did you have any downtime between graduation and starting training that you could visit with your family and all that?
No, because at that point in time, they kind of went away from the 30 days of leave after boot camp. My understanding is it used to be a common thing, because I remember friends that went to boot camp and were home for a month, and before they went to their next duty station, they were finding that they were having issues of a lot of the military bearing and stuff, and the growing up some of the folks did during boot camp was being all thrown out the window when they'd go home and get with their old friends and get back into their old habits. So when they'd get to their next duty station, they were going to have to, it was essentially having to almost start boot camp all over again. So for us, didn't get that opportunity. It wouldn't be, wow, it was probably almost 2.5 years before I finally got home again. Now, I did get to go on a couple times. We had extended vacations. I had an uncle and an aunt that lived in North Carolina. So I was able to hop on a flight up to there and visit them for the long weekend and go back to Orlando. That was the only option I really had.
So do you remember your graduation from boot camp? Did you have any family that was able to come down for it?
No family was able to make it down there. So I do remember the graduation. I was actually part of the, they called it the drill team, the rifle team, where we did, what do they call them? Like the TAPS groups, where they have the precision rifle group doing a show. I was part of that for boot camp. So it was actually a pretty neat experience because I got to do 4 graduations that were not my own. So up to that point, because I was a part of that group, we would perform at graduations. So I did 4 graduations and then actually performed at my own for passing reviews, they called it.
Did you enjoy being part of that?
That was a lot of fun. It was a little different break from being with the normal company and getting to experience and learn something like that. So, yeah.
For your job title, did you get to pick that before you went to boot camp, or how did that process kind of work?
Kind of got to pick it. So at that point in time, joining the nuclear power program, the only rate that they could guarantee that you could have was the machinist mate. And I didn't want to be a mechanic, and I didn't want to be an electrician. I wanted to actually operate the plant, operate a nuclear reactor. So it was kind of a toss your name in the hat and hopefully you get what you want. And I got lucky and was able to get the electronics technician rating.
When did you find out you got the position you wanted?
About 2 weeks before graduation.
And is that when you find out what kind of training you're going to?
Already knew based on conversations with other folks down in Orlando, because even when you get down there, they still kind of start getting things finalized, because they, even when we first got down there in the first couple of weeks going through all the in-processing and stuff like that, they ask you, do you want to stick with your original choice of being trying to be an ET, or do you want to get guaranteed this? Even some folks, because they'd get down there and the rates would be full, they said, well, we need you to move to another rate. It happened few and far between, but it did happen at boot camp. And talking to the recruiters when I joined in, because my recruiter was a nuke, gave me a lot of information of kind of what the training was to be expected. So
what was your advanced training like? Like, how long did it last?
Mine was, the standard ETA school at that point in time was 28 weeks long. Because I struggled academically a little bit because of the pace and whatnot. I got rolled back, so I was extended an extra 8 weeks, roughly. So mine ended up being 36 weeks long before I went to boot camp. So our A school was built around the conventional ET school that the Navy already has, but ours is just condensed for being in the nuclear pipeline. And you had to graduate with the GPA at 275 in order to proceed to power school. And I squeaked right in with like a 278. So I was pretty darn lucky.
So what was power school?
Power school is the start of learning how a nuclear power plant operates, the theory and stuff all behind, and design bases around a naval nuclear power plant. Metallurgy theory, reactor theory, math and electrical theory, plant design. That's what power school was about.
So it was more academic focus, or did you have hands-on experience in power?
It was still all academic at this point in time. The hands-on didn't come until the third and final step of the pipeline, which is prototype, where you go to an actual operational Navy nuclear power plant and learn how to operate it and qualify on that plant.
Is that considered part of power school, or is that after?
That's after. So there's 3 phases with the nuke program. There's A school, which is pretty much everybody in any kind of branch of service is going to have an A school type thing. That's where you learn they either call it your MROS, or in the Navy they call it your rating. That's where you get your fundamental skills to say, I'm an electrician, I'm a mechanic, I'm an aviation ordnanceman, an electronics technician, aviation electronics technician. That's what the A school does. Then the next step for the pipeline in the nuclear Navy is power school. That's where you start really the main path of learning the plant, a nuclear power plant. That's where you get your theory and plant design and stuff like that. And then the final step is the hands-on. If you graduate power prototype, you're a nuke. Then you got to go out to the fleet.
So what's the timeline like from boot camp all the way to you finished
to finishing prototype and going out to the fleet? Right around, so 6 months for power school, a little over 6 months for A school for us, 2 months. So close to 2 years. And depending on, again, like me, I rolled back, it could be up to 2.5 years. And of course, I kind of lined up everything just right. Again, like I said, with the transferring from boot camp, the same thing happens when you go from A school to power school. You may be there a month or two waiting for enough folks to filter in from follow-on classes to make an entire power school class. So you could be there up to 2.5, if almost 3 years in the entire pipeline.
After you finished all that training, were you able to actually go back home at that point, or?
Yes. So once I completed prototype, which I went to up in New York in the middle of the winter time. So I got there in the fall, went through the winter time, and left in the spring in New York. My dad flew out, and we drove my truck. We actually drove back cross country out to Idaho, because when I was reporting, our ship was leaving on a deployment less than a month later when I was going to report to the ship. So there was no point in trying to drive down to Norfolk, Virginia and leave a car for 6 months, if not longer. So did that, and then I flew back out to Virginia after about 30 days and reported to the ship, and was just in awe of learning where I was at and what I was doing till the ship went on deployment.
So at that point, so you didn't have any kind of like requirements between the finish of school and getting on the fleet? Like you had actual downtime?
Yes.
So you didn't have any requirements to be anywhere until you were?
Not until my report date of, I could have reported early, but I had to report no later than, which was in my orders, report no later than this date on my orders.
And about what year did you actually start like on the fleet?
96.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you remember your first day?
Yes, I do. It was late at night when I got into Norfolk. So I took a cab to the Naval Station Norfolk and got dropped off, paid for the cab, and went up to the ship. And I'm just have my sea bag in hand and walk up to the gate guard, show my ID, show my orders, and they called for somebody from personnel to come down and get me, and walked up to the ship and checked in with personnel, and then they handed me off to somebody in the Reactor Department, got me a rack, and I found a place to sleep for a few days till everything kind of got shifted around. Because it was so late, and I think it was on a weekend too, if I remember correctly, there wasn't a whole lot of folks around. So I had to wait till Monday for the main workforce of all the admins and the chain of command to show up to really get things rolling on the ship. So I was kind of there for 2 days, just twiddling my thumbs of what am I going to do? I don't know where to go. I don't know where I'm at. I knew enough of the ship, of a 1,100 foot long aircraft carrier, of how to get on and how to get off and get down to my rack and not get lost too bad. So that was about it.
So when you were on the ship, the carrier, what exactly did you do?
Initially, like anything, especially in the nuke power program, they're big on education. You got to learn, you got to qualify on, because now I'm on a new system. It's not the same as what I learned in power school or prototype. So we started out in basic nuclear engineering, learning the ship-specific reactor plant design and systems. The theory's all the same, splitting an atom and splitting an atom. So I had to go through BNUC, which was right around 4 months long. And then I got placed into a plant. Because the Enterprise was so big and her infamous 8 reactors, it was divided up into 4 plants: 1 plant, 2 plant, 3 plant, and 4 plant. So based on the number of electricians, mechanics, and ETs they get, they divide those up to the plants to keep the numbers relatively equal for the entire division. And I went to 2 plant. So that's where I got stuck and started qualifying. It was what they call senior rate, but eventually as a shutdown reactor operator.
Is there a difference between each plant, or are they all the same?
There were very slight differences. Basic plant design and layout, they were exactly the same, but one plant might have a slightly different steam generator for making steam and pushing the ship through the water. One might have a slightly different pressurizer for maintaining pressure inside the reactor coolant system. But it wasn't anything egregious that you had to do a whole entire separate qual from. Everything was close enough that once you qualified on one plant, you were qualified to stand on all 8 reactors wherever they needed you.
What was a typical day, roughly?
Your typical day changes based on where you're actually at in your qualifications. Being brand new to the ship, that's what you do. You'd get up, you'd muster, do a couple things, go down and start studying, get checkouts to exhibit your knowledge or lack of knowledge, as they like to call it, and get a sign-off, go do work, because things had to be cleaned, floors had to be stripped and waxed and all sorts of stuff. Bathrooms had to be cleaned. And then as you progressed through your qualification process, I guess you could say life got gradually easier, just because you didn't have the extra requirements of always having to go get a checkout, having to go get a stand a watch or something like that. You were pretty much do maintenance, stand watch, and whatever you want on your free time. Every now and then we'd have training for the division, and you'd have to go to that to help maintain your quals and stuff like that. And so you kind of get just in a routine, same thing over and over again. Call it Groundhog Day, because that's all you're doing. And I think I went about 2.5, almost 3 weeks one point in time without ever seeing the sunlight on the ship. Never really any reason to go above, is what we call it, the second deck, the main deck of the ship. So I tried to make it a point at some point in time to go up in the hangar bay, or what a lot of folks like to do is what they call Vulture's Row, the very top of the island that you could get to and watch flight ops, get some pseudo-fresh air with jets going off and whatnot, but just to take a look around and change the scenery for a bit.
Did you have any friends during power school, and did any of them follow you to the same fleet, or were they all separated?
I had friends, yes. Guys, we went through the entire pipeline together. A couple of my really good friends ended up going different places. One of my really good friends, Grady Hill, when we were in power school, got picked up for an officer program, and he actually went to the University of Northern Idaho in Moscow, Idaho. So we kind of got separated, but we kept in touch. And I actually, when I found out he got married, I, no kidding, hopped on a plane and flew into Boise, fell asleep till the next morning, and hopped in a car and drove about 4.5 hours to Northern Idaho to go see him get married.
So are you still friends with some of your first friends you made in the Navy?
I haven't seen them in so long. There was a couple that I'd kept in contact, but obviously with as I progressed in my naval career, some of them got out, and it's just so much going on. It was really hard to keep in touch because we didn't have the social media like we do today. There was no Facebook. Cell phones were just barely coming of age to where they were at now, making a phone call. Didn't even have that until I was here for a little while. So if it was either a letter or you knew their phone number, that was about it.
So you, when you first got into the fleet, it was about 96?
96.
So you had quite a couple of years under your belt before 9/11 happened.
Yes.
Was there a big shift in the Navy between before 9/11 and after it happened?
Shift in the Navy is how? I'm trying to...
Like operations, what was the impact of 9/11 on just general Navy operations?
General Navy operations, okay. So a little backstory, I guess, to go into that. Yes, there was obviously a shift in operations. At that point in time, you might have some folks from another branch of service disagree, but for the most part, the Navy, even in peacetime operations, their operational tempo didn't really change. We were on 6-month deployments. We'd do the workups and stuff on that. I mean, there was 1 year before 9/11 that I actually spent 11 months out of the year out to sea, and that was without the deployment. That was all the workups, the in and outs that we were doing 2 weeks in, 3 weeks in, or out. So the one thing that had kind of shifted with the Navy, from my understanding, talking to folks that had been in for a while, was the guaranteed 6-month deployment. It used to be you'd go out on a deployment, you're supposed to be gone for 6 months, and then 9 or 10 months later, you'd finally come home. Because it wouldn't necessarily be something bad would happen, it was just some folks know that senior officers, a captain's not going to make admiral unless he does a deployment. And if he's willing to volunteer to keep the ship out longer to make himself look good, then he's going to volunteer to keep the ship out longer. Because I remember reading in the headlines one time growing up that the Eisenhower had pulled back in from a 9-month deployment. So that was the one thing that had kind of shifted pre-9/11, guaranteed 6 months deployment. So when you left, you were pretty much guaranteed 6 months later you were going to come home. Did all that, and then when 9/11 happened, we didn't know when we were going to come home. And that's the big thing that shifted back again. You still have all the workup cycles. You got to still get the ship ready. You still go through all the shakedowns. You got to qualify the pilots. You got to qualify the ship to know that it's going to be able to recover an aircraft when it's out in the middle of the ocean and there's no land field around for 5,000 miles. So that's still all a requirement for the Navy. And then you go out and you don't know necessarily when you're going to come home. I don't know what a deployment cycle is if they're planning to be gone for 6, 7, 8, or 9 months now and then come home with the hopes of not getting extended because of what's going on. We ended up on 9/11 getting extended an extra 2 months. We were supposed to be back we didn't get back until October, if I remember correctly. Jackie, my wife, remembers it vividly. She goes, about the time we got home, she was about at her wit's end because she had a brand new baby. Danny was born at that point in time. My mom and my older sisters had gone out to see her. It was just a not knowing. And when we got back, she goes, I was about at my wit's end. She was making do. So that was the big thing with the change in the operational commitment, was no more guaranteed 9-month or 6-month deployments. You didn't know when you were going to come home.
So you were at sea when 9/11 happened?
Yes.
Did you find out relatively quickly, or did it take a few days to take?
We knew it. On the ship, we knew immediately. So with that, learning, you're getting into your routines and stuff like that, anybody will tell you, you know when something changes. So you know the basic operational tempo of what the ship was supposed to be doing. We were actually on our way to South Africa. We just left the Gulf on our way to South Africa. So we were supposed to be doing a head flank to nowhere. We were actually going to do our crossing the line ceremony because we were going to be crossing the equator the next morning. So everybody was kind of getting some rest, getting ready and prepped for all that. I was asleep at the time, and I felt the ship slow down. Again, you learn those kinds of things. You know when something changes. The ship slowed down and the ship turned. Could feel it. because where we slept, we were right above the steering gears, so you heard them things moving because they were loud. Sped back up, we were going again. I was like, okay, something's different. We weren't supposed to slow down. So I got up and I walk out of where my rack is, and there's like 3 guys like this in front of the TV, just mouth wide open. And I look on the TV, and that's when they show the first plane hit and the second plane hit, just over and over and over again. I was like, we're not going home anytime soon. We're going back to the Gulf. Captain hadn't even come on the line at this point in time, over the 1MC, the ship's announcing system, because it was after TAPS for us, after 2200, when this all happened, our time where we were at. Went and did my business. I came back, put my uniform on, went out and you just tell the whole mood of the entire ship was different. Everybody that was up had already known about that, had seen it on TV. We had TVs around the ship as well, and it was just on. Different news networks, CNN, Fox, CBS, all of them, they were all on, just running it over and over again. And because we were about 2 days out from the Gulf from when we had left, we got back on station, and Captain reported us on station waiting further orders. They'd shut down all the TV, they shut down all the phones, because we had ship-to-shore phones. We had computers for doing email, surfing a little bit of the internet based on bandwidth and sending emails. They'd shut all that stuff down. It was about 2.5 weeks later before they even let anything happen for making phone calls or sending emails or anything like that. And we had to have all that information scrubbed because they didn't want to have operational things put out over email or over phone. So I had a guy from 2 days ago or a few weeks before that, when I could go make a phone call and talk to my wife, to having to make a phone call and have somebody sit there right next to me and listen to my phone conversation because they didn't want any operational information sent out. Same thing with the emails. They had to, at first, they had some stuff, you had to send them to our, what we called our LPO, our leading chief. They'd scrub them and then they'd send them off. And there was a couple folks that tried sliding some stuff in on the down low, and they got caught, and it didn't go so well for them. Because everybody knows operational stuff is security information, so they didn't like that too much. They got busted. So
you're still able to contact your wife and all that during? After
a couple weeks, yes. It was limited. We were limited to I think a 10-minute phone call. Of course, it was also expensive. It was if you wanted to make a phone call, it was like $1 a minute. But we were limited to a certain amount of phone call. Emails, obviously, they were kind of unlimited, but we still, like I said, had to send them to somebody to get reviewed before they would send them off the ship to make sure you weren't talking about anything. So, but yeah, I was able, after the initial couple weeks, I was able to contact the wife again. So
you essentially had radio silence during those 2 weeks, so you couldn't contact?
Yes, couldn't do nothing. The only thing we could watch was TV, and that was it. Mail had stopped for those couple weeks till they started letting mail off and bringing it back on.
Did you ever get reasoning for why the Navy decided to extend, since the Navy didn't really have any sort of response they could do to help?
Well, the one thing about the Navy, I think I mentioned before, is we were always kind of even in peacetime, we were always in a wartime type status, because the Navy is the quickest way with an aircraft carrier to get somewhere essentially now. Air Force, Army, Marine Corps, unless they're already stationed overseas and they want to take them from their area of responsibility and send them to someplace new, it still takes logistics. We're out in the middle of the ocean. We need you here now. It's a lot easier to resource an aircraft carrier off the coast somewhere than it is to try and get an entire battalion of infantry from somewhere, from point A to point B, or an entire squadron of Air Force jets from point A to point B. So we're always usually the first to respond. The Navy, they like to say that, we're the first to respond because it is a lot easier for that projection of power, as they like to call it.
So did you guys send aircrafts off your carrier at that point, or were they all grounded?
They weren't grounded. We still have to maintain carrier quals no matter what. So now, as far as like getting final orders, we weren't, from my understanding, I think I can mention this. From my understanding, again, this is just kind of hearsay, is we weren't, when we slowed down and turned around, we were not actually tasked to go back up there. But the captain had enough foresight to understand something's going to change, something's going to happen, we need to be ready. So he actually turned us around and said and when we got back up there, we're on station awaiting further orders. And then progressively, as we started going more and more, and then they started doing the troop buildups, that's when things started getting busier and busier on the ship, of moving ordnance around, doing unreps and bringing supplies on, and more weaponry for the aircraft. The SEAL team, because usually the carriers had a SEAL team detachment on them, they were gone, never to be seen from again. They were off doing whatever they were doing, because my leading chief petty officer was really good friends with one of the SEALs that was on board. I think shortly after 9/11, it was about a month after 9/11, he said he showed up on the ship. He caught him at his rack, and he's like, "Hey, what's up?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm back out again." He was packing a bunch of stuff up and gone. Never saw him again. No telling how long those guys were over after we left. So, that's when we knew something was going to start happening with the fighting, is when they started picking up, when we started doing a lot of unreps and bringing on supplies and weaponry and stuff to keep the aircraft armed up.
Did your day-to-day operations change at all, like specifically yours?
It did, from the aspect of, because in Reactor Department, we have to run drills. We have to maintain our proficiency in the case we have an actual, no kidding, casualty. We are proficient enough to combat whatever that casualty is that might affect the ship. Because they were flying so much, we had to limit the amount of time, or the certain amount of time that we could do those drills. Because it was they needed to keep the plants up, they needed to keep power to the ship, keep the steam going to meet the new operational tempo. So we didn't run drills for well over a month, which is usually kind of unheard of. We'd walk through some drills. We couldn't do anything to affect the plant, so they'd come down and we'd actually do a drill walkthrough, as they call it, of, okay, if this happens, what immediate actions are you going to take? And we'd have to walk through all that from memory, like we normally did. Just couldn't do anything or flip any switches on the plant or anything to affect propulsion. So
I'm going to move away from 9/11 focus and just kind of go to like your deployments. And
okay.
As your job, were you always on a carrier, or did you ever spend time like on like a naval base or something?
So yes, I have a seesaw rotation in the Navy. So typically, you're supposed to spend about 5 years out at sea, and then you're supposed to go to 3 years to a shore billet. Of course, with nukes, you're rather limited on where you can go because of the training and stuff. So, hearing about the fun in the sun down in Australia, or going somewhere in Spain or whatnot as a Navy nuke, was kind of few and, didn't ever get to go to Australia. It was either Virginia, Charleston, South Carolina, or New York. Unless you were on a tender, then you might be able to get to go to Italy somewhere. So I was 6.5 years on the prize. I left there in 2002, and I went to the Norfolk Regional Maintenance Department, NRMD, at Naval Station Norfolk. Went over there, again, learning what I had to do. Had to go through a qualification program. And I got to work on the submarines a lot on the waterfront, going down, maintaining. So when a submarine had pulled in, they'd need certain services and stuff hooked up. We'd go down and do that. Certain maintenance activities that required us, because the ships don't have the manpower to do, or the equipment to do certain maintenance activities. That's where SIMA, Norfolk, as they call it, Ships Intermediate Maintenance Activity, NRMD, where I worked at, in Norfolk Naval Shipyard, that's where they'd all come into play. They'd go down and do that complex maintenance while the ship was in port that didn't require them to actually be in the shipyard. So that's what I did for 3 years there. Worked in the shop, qualified a few things, and then I became the leading petty officer. So about 8 months before I left NRMD, I was the one telling folks where to go and scheduling things. Because we were actually in a lull there, certain filtration systems on the ship for the reactor plant, every so often they need to be changed out. We were in between that, so there was actually kind of a downtime at NRMD for big work like that. They call them resin discharges. It's a work intensive operation that goes quite a while. So we didn't have any of those. They were starting to gear back up right when I left. And then I reported back to the Roosevelt when I left NRMD.
So when you switched carriers, did you have to requalify?
Yep. So qualification process for an electronics technician like me, where ultimately your end game is to be a qualified reactor operator / shutdown reactor operator. There's some sub-watch stations that we're responsible for, so you go through that up until the point that you qualify reactor operator, shutdown reactor operator. So I'm qualified to operate the plant at power and then shut down in port, because we're 24/7, got to monitor the plant. And the commanding officer grants you that quals. So I completed that on the Enterprise. They wanted me to qualify as a supervisory watch. I was actually qualified reactor technician, which was one step above it, reactor operator. So I was responsible for the guys actually operating and performing maintenance and stuff. But there was kind of senior enlisted, there's a watch supervisor, propulsion plant watch supervisor. They're in charge of making sure everybody's operating and reviewing logs for the entire plant that they're responsible for. I didn't qualify that on the Roosevelt, not the Roosevelt, but the Enterprise. Much to the dismay of one of my leading chief petty officers. Sorry, James Gilbert. I know you still dislike me about that one till this day. But so when I transferred to the Roosevelt, because I was already qualified senior rate on another ship, I wasn't required to requalify all the subordinate watch stations. I was only required to requalify reactor operator and shutdown reactor operator. And then once I did that, I jumped into watch supervisor quals. So it was not the same. Yeah, some of it was same, some of it was different. So, but yeah, I still had to get requalified. Still had to learn, because every ship's different. Had to learn their systems and go talk to the commanding officer. Hopefully, display my knowledge to get qualified and say, "Yep, you're safe enough to sit the panel and operate my nuclear power plant on my ship."
So when you had free time on the carrier, was there anything you liked doing, or?
Sleep. Anybody in the military will probably tell you the one thing you want to try and do whenever you get a chance in your free time is to try and get some shut-eye. Yeah, send an email, check on a couple things, because even in my free time when I wasn't on watch, I was, because I was in charge at that point in time, was reviewing paperwork, writing evaluations for the junior sailors and stuff that I was responsible for, and coordinating varying things. So in between all that, getting a chance to email the wife or writing a letter or something like that, getting a package, was trying to get some sleep. Try and work out if I could. So, yeah.
Did you pursue any higher education when you were in the Navy, or?
No, I didn't. I thought about it a couple times, but I wanted to concentrate on what I was doing in the Navy. Not to knock a college education. I'm a firm believer of you got to learn something. I'm a firm believer in the more you learn, the more you earn. that's kind of why I did what I did in the Navy and stuck it out for 20 years. But I kind of considered myself, not necessarily a rebel, but I rebelled kind of against the concept that I was beat into my entire time growing up in elementary, junior high, and high school, that I had to have a college education to succeed in this country. And I didn't believe it. I knew I had to know something, but that's why I joined the nuclear power program. So I kind of bounced back and forth, but I really had no desire to go to college.
Did you get any additional certifications or trainings to level up or get a higher rank?
The qualifying the propulsion plant watch supervisor was the one thing that I needed to advance from E6 or Petty Officer First Class to Chief Petty Officer, pay grade E7. I had gotten another qualification in there. It was called Electronic Technician Maintenance School. Some folks know it as 2M school, actually. It's where you learn soldering, more advanced troubleshooting and stuff for electrical systems and stuff like that. So I was able to get that certification. I went to quite a few leadership classes and stuff, got some certifications for that. So other than that, the watch soup was the next big thing that I did.
Do you ever go to officer training or?
No, never went to officer training because they generally kept that separate. I do know folks that became officers. Usually the step with taking the chief's exam is it can qualify you as a limited duty officer. So I know a lot of guys that did that. So then you would go to officer training for that. That's the one way of getting a commission in the military without actually having to have a 4-year college degree. The only thing about a limited duty officer is it doesn't allow you to be in command of a ship, whereas the guys that go through the Naval Academy or at ROTC at a 4-year college, they can be, that's where your command staff comes from. So,
what were some of your favorite memories during your time in the Navy?
There's a lot of them. There really is. Because there's a lot of non-military favorite memories. Getting married, birth of my daughter, the two highlights. But as far as military specific memories, it was the chance of being able to serve on a ship, whether it was a submarine or an aircraft carrier. I didn't care. I was a sub-vol. And then I found myself on the USS Enterprise out of Norfolk, Virginia. Go figure. It's as much as it was a tough life and whatnot, and sometimes I hated it, because you can't go through your entire military career and enjoy every minute of it. There are times of hate. It still amazed me that you could take 100,000 tons of steel and make it float in the water. You could take a $15, $30, or $45 million aircraft and sling it 150 feet down a piece of steel and get it into the air, and then turn right around and have a controlled crash and recover that thing right back on the deck. Just the intricacies, the ins and outs of making that happen. It was mind-boggling, in awe every day of watching that happen.
So did it always bring some sort of enlightenment, excitement every time you saw it happen? Or did you eventually just get used to it?
Even though I got used to it, I still always enjoyed watching it happen. I never let that moment go. Never let that tarnish. Had some real respect because, like anybody in the military, the good fun we have in between the individual rates and self, because there was electricians, mechanics, and electronics technicians in Reactor Department. So we always had a good time of, they'd say rate bashing, but we're not rate bashing, giving each other a hard time and good fun. And even between Reactor Department and the top side of the ship, there was a lot of, I think it's just misunderstanding and stuff that between it, anybody that's in the Navy will say that Airedales are all they were good for was standing in line. We call them Chowdales for a reason, whatnot. But they had a very, very important function. They were the ones responsible for getting the aircraft up and down. The fire team crew, the fire crew for the shift, the air wing, mad respect to those guys. Because we had an incident on the Enterprise in '98. We had a jet clip another one on the flight deck. Killed 4 pilots. One of the closest things we come to seriously damaging the ship that we might have had, they thought we were going to have to turn around and pull back into port. And we were getting ready to leave on our deployment. We're doing our carrier quals, getting ready to leave. We lost 2 aircraft. Almost lost a whole bunch because there was a fuel tank that was on fire rolling into a bunch of fully fueled F-18s. That fire crew, normally you just go up there and look. Yeah, they're standing by ready to go, but they're out there sunning or just waiting. Not a moment's hesitation. Not a moment's hesitation. Those guys saved the ship. They saved a lot of bad things from happening that day. Mad respect to those guys that were on the fire team for the air flight deck. So it just shows that everybody has an importance. No matter what they do, no matter how much of a hard time we give each other, everybody knew we had an importance. They knew that they weren't going to get from point A to point B if it wasn't for us. They weren't going to get the jets in the air if it wasn't for us making the steam and stuff like that. So it was just a lot of camaraderie and stuff like that for the folks that really wanted to enjoy those kinds of things and understood.
How many deployments did you have?
I did 3 on the Enterprise and 2 on the Roosevelt. So I did 5 total.
Were they all different lengths?
My first 2 on the Enterprise were 6 months. Then the last one on the Enterprise, because that was 9/11, was the 8 month. And then my 2 on the Roosevelt were right around 7. They weren't 6, but they weren't 8. So they were right around 7 by the time we got home.
So when you weren't on the carriers, were you still working or how did that
when we're in port, because again, the ships, there's still maintenance that has to be done on the plant systems. Got to make sure everything's working. Still got to be monitored 24/7. So we'd come to work, muster, divvy the folks up for cleaning, training, and maintenance work. And then at the end of the day, once everything was done, the folks that weren't on duty could go home, and the duty section would stay and keep an eye on the plant. Had to take logs 24/7, 365 days a year. It didn't matter what was going on. Excuse me.
You said you were able to work maintenance on a submarine?
Yes.
Was that import or was that?
Import. Yeah, part of Norfolk, the Norfolk Regional Maintenance Department. I actually got a chance one time to go up to a submarine that was docked up at Yorktown's Naval Weapons Station because they had something they thought in the system, and we had to go find it and get it cleaned out so they could operate.
Were you ever awarded any sort of medals or honors?
Standard good conduct medal. So if you don't get in trouble, keep your nose clean for, when I first started, it was every 4 years, but they changed that to every 3 years. You would get what they called the good conduct medal. Got the National Defense Medal, which was just kind of for being in the military and serving in the time of need. I actually earned 2 of those because even though the first war in the Middle East was way over, there was still a grace period of folks serving in the military earned that. And then when 9/11 happened, I was awarded that one again. So they called that the National Defense. Earned the Global War on Terrorism Service and Expeditionary Medal. Navy Achievement Medal, they call it a NAM, for doing things kind of above and beyond. I was awarded a couple of those. And then I was awarded 2 Navy Commendation Medals, which is an even farther step above the Navy Achievement Medal. I was awarded 2 of those. I was awarded one as my end of tour from the Enterprise, because a lot of the folks liked what I did and how I did it on there. And then when I retired from the Navy, I was awarded my second one of those.
So what led to the decision to leave the Navy?
After 20 years, 10 days, and a few hours, it was time to come home. It really was. I didn't want to go back out to sea. So the personal aspect of it, I'd missed enough of my daughter's life that I wanted to be home for it. I didn't like the way the Navy was starting to head with certain policies and procedures. There's always going to be something you dislike, but I didn't like it, and I just didn't want to go back to that tempo again. I was ready for a change.
So did that decision come like after your last deployment? Was like there any big event that led you to deciding to leave the Navy, or was it just general, you've been in the Navy for so long, you wanted to change?
Just wanted my 20, I was done. 30 if you love it, 20 if you don't. A lot of folks will probably understand what that means. And in some aspects of it, because for us, I think all branches have something very similar. You have to be a certain rank to stay a certain amount of time. So they call it, not time and rate, excuse me, not perform to serve, like a high-year tenure type thing. So at one point in time, you could be in the Navy for 20 years and be an E5, a second-class petty officer. Well, they changed that. Their high-year tenure essentially was you couldn't be in past 10 years if you were not advanced to the rank of E6, because they were trying to get folks to promote and not stagnate. So they changed that to like 10 years. So I know a couple guys, I know one guy, he had to study his butt off to make E5, otherwise he was going to get out of the Navy. So he was able to do that. So E6, 20 years, then you had to retire. E7, I could have stayed up to 23 years, but then I would have had to make E8 or senior chief petty officer to stay to 27. And then I would have had to make Master Chief Petty Officer or E9 to stay to 30. And I didn't really have any desire to stay past 20, because when you start doing that, it actually starts detracting from companies to hire you on. Because for some Master Chiefs, if you've been in for 30 years, some companies look at it, you've just been in for so long, we don't know if we can change your mindset. Because it's completely different for what I do now. And I don't operate now, but I train people to operate again, a nuclear power plant in the civilian world, but it's a totally different mindset. So from that aspect also of didn't want to take my marketability away, I retired at 20.
So how did deployment work? Like, were you signed based like on a yearly contract, or like? So
I'm sorry, repeat that one more time. How did
like, you just went, like, you'd have to sign up for like a 2-year contract, like?
No, okay. So, I understand the question now, sorry. So my original enlistment was 6 years. It was a 6-year hitch initially to begin with. So to sign up to be a Navy noob, do all the schooling stuff, I would say I would stay in the Navy for 6 years. That was my minimum obligation. If I wanted to get out after that 6, as long as I did it honorably, go ahead. When I was on the Enterprise, I decided to reenlist. So I re-enlisted for another 6 years, and that actually took me out to, because the way I did it, it took me past 8 years of service. And then I re-enlisted again. So you re-enlist for a certain amount of time, and then eventually just ended up staying out till 20. They had to change some things. One was the 9/11 type aspect of it, because they needed folks to stay in. Because if somebody left, that's a lot of knowledge and stuff that walks out the door. Because it used to be if you wanted to stay into 20, after 14 years, you got to do it for free. You didn't get a re-enlistment bonus. This will rub some folks the wrong way too. Not everybody got a re-enlistment bonus. But again, because of the time and effort that they invested in the nuclear power program and training somebody, they wanted to give you that little carrot to try and stay in. So I got lucky. They changed the re-enlistment stuff, and I was they called it enlisted supervisory retention pay. I was able to get a re-enlistment bonus to stay out till 20. So it wasn't all bad. I wasn't going to turn it down.
So what were your plans leaving the Navy? Did you know you wanted to stay in that field?
Yeah, because it's one of those things that amazes me that we can split an atom and harness all its power. I think it's a pretty good gig to me. So if I could have, I wanted to stay in it, and that's what I did. But the one thing that a lot of companies understand too, that for a Navy nuke, because you're trainable and being in the military, generally self-sufficient, so it's real easy to pick up on things. But this goes for a lot of folks. I mean, there's some folks that they can pick up something, it doesn't matter. They don't have to be a Navy nuke. They can pick up something, they understand it right off the bat. But I've heard a lot of things that not just from folks from other branches of the service, but otherwise, they like Navy nukes because of the tempo and stuff that they've had to maintain for their academic curriculum.
So what do you do now?
I'm a nuclear instructor at Surry Power Station. So I actually have a couple different hats out there. My main thing that I do is everybody that's reporting on site, before they can access the plant, they got to go through security background checks, security clearance checks, and stuff like that, background checks. They've got to do certain training to, as per the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, to get the required access. So I provide that. They come out, I have a trailer that I'm in, and they sit down on a computer and they go through all this training. I proctor their exams. Then I do some hands-on training towards the end of the week to make sure that they know how to properly put on protective clothing, can go into a confined space, various other things, wear respirators. Then I'm a mechanical instructor, so I provide training for the mechanical maintenance department that's out at Surry. Go over systems, go over plant equipment, how to do maintenance on stuff like that. So,
have you been at Surry since you've left the Navy?
Yes. So started that back I retired in 2014. So I started out in operations out there, which if I would have stayed into that field, into that department, I would have eventually hopefully got my license to operate at Surry by the NRC. But they had an instructor position open up about a year into my time out in operations, and I applied for that because I actually really enjoyed teaching. That's what I retired doing from the Navy down in Charleston. I was an instructor at A school, and I really enjoyed doing that. Didn't think I would. I guess I found kind of a new calling, so I applied for it, and I got picked up, and I've been in training ever since, and I've been out at the company going on 9 years now.
How did you readjust to being a civilian from being in the Navy?
Probably took me about 3 months to stop checking my gig line and checking for a TLD on my belt and checking for a cover. Yeah, that was the biggest one. It took me probably took me a solid 5 years to stop shaving every day. I can't go too long. I don't like too much of a beard, start scratching too much, but I don't shave as much as I used to. So yes, those couple things.
Was there anything in particular that helped or hindered your readjustment to civilian life?
Not really, no.
Did you make any close friends while you were in the Navy?
Yes.
Are you still in contact with any of them?
Try to on occasions. The Facebook and stuff has helped a little bit, but a couple of my friends are actually still in the Navy, so it's really hard to keep in contact with them as they're constantly doing something. Yeah.
How did your service impact your family, both and your social life, when you were in the Navy versus now?
Impact my social life. Trying to think. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to draw a blank of how to answer this. Definitely when we go out and I meet somebody new, the Navy has helped a big time with talking to folks. Because I can honestly remember the first time that I sat down in front of a camera for an interview when I was in junior high. I didn't know what to do. I did not like having a camera in my face. Now, because of some of the things I've had to do in the Navy, in front of a camera, in front of a commanding officer, a full bird captain, in front of an admiral, and on camera at Surry Power Station, it's made it kind of easy. So interacting with folks, that's probably the biggest difference I've got. I've always been kind of shy. Had a hard time looking folks in the face just because of not necessarily the confidence thing, but just somebody I didn't know. That's really changed since I was in the military, big time.
How did being in the Navy impact your marriage?
Had a very supportive wife, have a very supportive wife. She's always understood. Her dad was in the Merchant Marines, so she was used to him being gone a lot. So it was all difficult for her, but she understood. So she was always very supportive of everything that I've done and very understanding that I'm going to be gone for 6 months. Again, the 9/11 thing, just because of the not knowing, was her biggest thing. But she's been able to cope very well.
How did being in the Navy impact you as a parent, both while you were away and when you got back?
Well, I guess it's just led to me spoiling my daughter even more, trying to make up for the time that I was gone. Not, saying no within reason. It was not saying no within reason, but just trying to show the love and affection that, even though I was gone, I was still always there for her. Same thing with the wife. She knew. They're proud of me, and I'm proud of them. Very proud of them. So.
Have you had any health issues related to your service?
None that I can tell of. I know, from my understanding, because the ship was so old, there was still asbestos on the ship, but I haven't encountered any impacts from that. I still try to run on a regular basis and stuff. The only thing that I really had an impact on is I tore my meniscus when I was down in Charleston. So depending on the weather, because I had the knee surgery to remove some of that, it just kicks up. But for the most part, I'm probably perfectly healthy.
How did your service and experiences in the Navy affect the rest of your life so far?
So far, wouldn't trade it for the world. If I had to go back and do it all over again, I'd probably be a nuke again. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't change anything. I think it's been tremendous for me. I don't think I've changed. I mean, there's some aspects I know I've changed a little bit, but my dad tells me, he tells me he's proud of me all the time when I talk to him. I talk to him at least once a week. Proud of what I've done, what I've accomplished, where I'm at. I think the Navy's helped a lot, the structure and stuff like that, to know that there's nothing really that I cannot do. If I want to do it, I can. So
how has being in the Navy prepared you for life outside the military? Is it that kind of structure?
Yeah, that kind of structure. I still get up at 4:30 every morning. I can't seem to break that even on the weekends when I don't have to go to work. Just getting up and going and doing. Relaxing when I can, sleeping when I can, doing other things, tearing a car apart, doing work on it, accomplishing, taking pride in the things that I do on a day-to-day basis.
So we're coming to the end of the interview, so I have a couple last questions to ask. What have been some highlights of your life? You mentioned getting married. Having
my daughter, retiring from the military. That's the top three. Top tied for number one, getting married or having the birth of my daughter. Those are tied for number one. Number two was retiring from the Navy. And just seeing where family and friends are at. I'm a big family person, big on friendships. Seeing where my 21-year-old baby, she'll always be my baby. And you'll see when I start talking about her, because I'm just so proud. It's one of them things. Seeing where she's at, she's following her mom's footsteps of being a nurse. Seeing where you're at, I'm not going to detract that at all. Watching you grow up, watching you and her, being able to be a part of that in not just her life, but in yours and everything and the friends and stuff. Serving 20 years for this country, to see all that, that's what makes it all worth it. Seeing where you guys are at, that's what I love.
How would you like to be remembered?
A good friend, good husband, good father, a good son. Honestly. Yep.
And lastly, is there anything you would like to discuss that we have talked about or haven't talked about?
I think we've covered quite a bit. I know I've rambled a little bit, but no, there's nothing I really can't think of. I think it's pretty good.
All right. I just want to thank you for sharing your story.
Oh, no, thank you for having me. Enjoyed it.